Hello and welcome to our series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today had his baptism in politics as a student leader with the iconic Jayaprakash Narayan. He's been described as a crusader, intellectual, erudite, passionate, committed, and with a sense of humor. I'm delighted to welcome the Minister of Information Broadcasting, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad.
Thank you for the kind word.
A time of transition, uncertainty for a person holding political office with elections imminent. How do you feel?
Well, if you're in politics, elections are a part of that. Therefore, one gets used to live with elections. And after all, politics is a game of uncertainty as well. I've always felt this post of minister is always uncertain. Today I'm a minister, tomorrow I may not remain a minister. But so long as I'm holding a particular office, I have my idea that I must work and let my work speak for me. That's how I take life.
You described politics as a game. How do you think that Jayaprakash Narayan would sort of respond to the inheritors of his legacy today?
When I talked of game, I only said elections are a game of politics. Politics, I take something very seriously. Well, as far as JP is concerned, I consider myself singularly fortunate that I could work with him. A man of his towering personality, his vision, his commitment. Yes, many of his disciples, quote unquote, could not measure up to the standards which he expected. But the greatest contribution of JP, which I feel, is that India shall remain a democracy, A. B. There shall be no emergency in the country, internal emergency. And C. India shall continue to be governed by democracy, democratic processes. And there is a political consensus across the board there. That, I feel, is the biggest contribution of JP.
Do you feel you have lived up to those expectations you might have had of his firebrand student leader?
Well, it is for others to judge. I can only say that I have tried to live as much as possible with his ideals, sense of rectitude, sense of commitment.
What about you personally? What lack do you feel in terms of fulfilling JP's vision for the ideal activist, politician, crusader you've been?
Yes, I tried my best to live up to that even in Bihar when I was active as a lawyer in the fight against corruption. I was a human rights activist also. Therefore, those I have tried to live, but living up to JP's ideals is a continuous process. Yes, one feels that in a short span of one's activism in politics or in a particular assignment, one would try to do that. But I think JP basically took a very holistic view of politics, democracy, people's participation, sense of accountability. That I would feel is an ongoing process. And one has tried to live up to those standards at all the times one is active.
You know, in this program some years ago we had Lee Kuan Yew, and I'd asked him that whether as a politician he had, in his role as a politician, not in his personal role, he'd ever had to lie in terms of, at the superficial level of making promises that you knew you cannot keep because it's going to win you an election. Have you ever felt compromised in your political incarnation?
Yes, I would say yes. Because I have tried to develop a political personality of my own. Not possible to be done, I must say no. And if something is possible to be done, I could say yes, I'll consider it or I will do it. But there is always the pressure of competitive politics. And many of my friends suggest, why should you say a blunt no? I know it is difficult.
So what has been the most difficult no you've had to say?
One cannot concretize in one or two. These problems keep on recurring. Therefore, yes, that is a game of politics.
Some of the difficult ones, I mean not the most difficult, but what have been some of the difficult choices, the moral choices, dilemmas that you have had to confront?
You see, on the moral choices, particularly in case of officers and all, people having high political connections, he should be retained or this particular policy has to be followed. I can tell you many of the other media related issues which I handle in my course of my assignment as an INB minister had a lot of stakes involved. I can tell you about the uplinking news segment.
Well, tell us about uplinking. You volunteered.
But I said, if this is not permissible, it shall not be permissible. If there is a particular rule of 26% equity, let's follow it. And I'm happy they also understood the game. There are pressures and counter pressures always come about. But on moral questions, I'm a little particular. And I'm quite sure that if there is patience and perseverance, ultimately it pays to be a person who has a definite views on many things. Yes, one should always be open to suggestions and also corrections, which I am. I would always. But on certain issues I say it is not possible and it is not possible.
What about something like gas, which has given your ministry a turbulent run? It was something that you inherited. It was an act of government, it was a government decision, and it was here your job to implement it. If you were to look at gas again, would you look at that bill again? Would you conceptualize it differently and have saved yourself that?
As you rightly put, it was a part of my legacy, but it's a government policy. I say it in a broad canvas. Television is growing at the rate of 31%. We have got the best channels of the world. Indian creativity is there. At the distribution level, there is a lot of problem. Therefore, there has to be a proper mechanism. CAS was one. But yes, let me concede, some of the assumptions which underlied the whole movement of CAS turned out to be incorrect. And one of the most important was that the stakeholders would fight like this: MSO versus broadcasters, MSO versus MSO, MSO versus cable operator, cable operators versus cable operator. We had not thought this would occur. That did occur. That was, I would say, a letdown. Perhaps, therefore, we have come with a regulator also. He's working the whole mechanism.
But is there a sense of sort of loss of control that it now goes to the telecom regulatory authority rather than an authority that you might have created yourself?
You see, in principle, I'm all for a regulator, broadcasting regulator. Even in the parliament, I said like that. But there was a convergence bill. But I feel that the problem and the exclusive character of broadcasting merits a separate regulator. That has been my position earlier and even now.
So if you're back as Minister of Information and Broadcasting, is that something that might be on the anvil?
As of now, we have a regulator. He's working out the detail. Therefore, I don't want to make any further comments. As far as coming back as an INB minister is concerned, that is the prerogative of the Prime Minister. And speaking for myself, I have never aspired for any particular post. I was given the Minister of Coal and Mines, given the additional charge of law. Now I am the independent charge of INB. Here the PM is the leader. Whatever job he will give me, I shall do. But I shall try to make a difference by my performance. With the motto, let my work speak for me.
What is it then that keeps you in politics? This motto, isn't there an aspiration of some ambition, of some achievement of political status or office or recognition or applause?
Well, Raju, I would say that I would be hypocritical if I say that I don't have ambition. In politics, one comes for ambition.
So what is that mission?
Okay. But the idea is that what is the route you take to fulfill that ambition? I began my career, I would say, activism as an RSS swamsevak when I was a kid. Then there was Vidyarthi Parishad, JP movement, BJP activism, a long route. But one gains experience also. And I am not overtly ambitious. That I know for sure. But whatever job is given to me, I shall always remain this, I'll keep this motto for my life: let my work speak for me. And the fulfillment also comes from the work. I can only say that many of the decisions which I have taken as an INB minister in regard to pushing the case of films, making them competitive, film festivals, regime change, Doordarshan news channel, all have turned out to be a good experiment. I hope this process goes on. But I am greatly optimistic about a very powerful future of India's entertainment industry, broadcasting, radio. I feel passionately for radio. India is sitting for a radio revolution. And as a minister, I shall try to push it to the maximum.
In what ways might the government, at a time when governments are retreating from most aspects of public broadcasting in most parts of the world, in what ways might the government proactively maintain that balance of the autonomy of the public broadcaster and yet being a catalyst for the cause of public broadcasting, the whole issue of funding. What is your, you mentioned a vision.
You see, as far as public broadcaster is concerned, I am convinced there shall remain the role of a public broadcaster, particularly in a huge and diverse country like India. And I, as a minister, they must work, they must be given the logistical support, they must be given the maximum help, because education, awareness, need to educate about reforms, reaching to the people in the farthest corner of a huge country like India. All this requires a good active role for a public broadcaster, and don't misunderstand that. Akashvani and Doordarshan have played a very crucial role. Yes, now broadcasting is free. Other players are quite allowed to come, but they have prima facie commercial considerations. Another issue which is troubling me a lot, if India has to grow, which I am sure it would, it is doing already, we need to reform ourselves. Then we need to educate about the need for reform, changing of mindset, how reforms bring the desired result. Who will do all this? The public broadcaster. Education, health. Therefore, that role is there consistent with autonomy. And the government's role is only to give the requisite fund with general policy interaction and guidances whenever needed. Therefore, that objective needs to be pushed forward, and I shall always do that.
Well, even as you talk of funds, it's time for a brief commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this conversation with Ravi Shankar Prasad, Minister for Information and Broadcasting. So long as the government continues to fund, and we come back after a commercial break that needs to drive much of public broadcasting, because there is this ambiguity. How much does the public broadcaster earn? How much does the government give it? How constitutionally, formally, structurally can the public broadcaster be independent of government so long as it receives government from the minister? So long as the minister is able to say that, I will empower broadcasting, to what degree is broadcasting independent of the minister? How do you see this ideal model, and what would be the aspiration?
Well, when I talk of public broadcasting, I never miss the point that they also need to become professional, consistent with the needs of modern times. And the role of the government ought to be to facilitate that process of
professional is distinct from commercial.
Yes. No. Therefore, I am saying that. Now, as far as earning revenue is concerned, public broadcasters should not be motivated only by the desire to earn, but the focus of revenue sharing should not be lost sight of completely. And therefore, let me give you a concrete example of Doordarshan news channel. The marketing strategy was done well, and against a target of 2 crore in the 4 months, they are going to surpass that. Marketing strategy, need to earn, need to have good revenue, consistent with governmental support through budgetary allocations and otherwise. If this healthy relationship grows, because Raju, you must understand, we are in democracy. The moment you become public broadcaster, parliamentary control shall remain there. To the standing committee, the consultative committee, questions being asked, I being made accountable for their performance in the parliament. Therefore, this relationship has to be there.
But isn't there a difference between parliamentary control and parliamentary accountability?
I would say the dividing line is thin. But if we are in democracy, we have to accept that part of the game. That is also for the health of the institution as well, this accountability process. And therefore, I say, when people say that Doordarshan and Akashvani must compete with commercial channels, I say there a decision is taken at a drop of a hat. Here, there is a process, there is an accountability. If in spite of that, Doordarshan, Akashvani excel, it is a matter of great pride.
To what degree do you feel that you have been able to catalyze this process? What are the interventions that you feel that you can own in this regard?
It is not for me to say, Rajiv, but I think people say that I am the least intervention minister as far as many of the channels are concerned. If today DD News is a success story, even other people are writing about it. I believe in public broadcaster as a matter of commitment. I have told you very clearly. And after becoming the INB minister, I have studied it in detail. And I am convinced that India needs a public broadcaster.
You have also been a great articulator and a vociferous a statesperson in a sense for the independence of the media, but more importantly for freedom of expression. And yet, ironically, it's during your tenure, we recently had this issue of censorship at the Bombay International Film Festival, and where following the intervention of the government, the formal criteria for censorship was removed. And yet seems to have in some ways, and so 275 eminent filmmakers are signatories to this, feel that somehow it's come in through the back door.
Well, as far as censorship is concerned, my view is very clear. And my view is, the government should not have any role. There is a censor board that should take a decision on general principles. As far as the documentary film festival is concerned, when the controversy was brought to my notice, I inquired. They said this censorship is being insisted upon to know the year of the making of the documentary. I said, let's do away with this. Thereafter, I said, let the government should not have any role. Let the festival be run by the selection committee. Yes, I was informed that there was certain grievances against the selection process. Now, Rajiv, if there is any film festival world over, there can be two views about it, any award for that matter. Therefore, after all, there has to be some finality. And this I certainly ensured that the government should not have any role in the selection process, in the scrutiny process. They were eminent filmmakers. For instance, a name for the Dada Sahab, the great eminent Shantaram Award, the best documentary filmmaker came. They sent 3 names. I will select the best name which they recommended as number 1. I should trust their judgment. But there comes a time where competing claim on awards, if in one festival my film has been given the award, why I am being ignored here?
We'll be right back after a brief commercial break. Welcome back to this conversation with Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad. We're looking at this aspect of competition. You mentioned competitive politics. You mentioned sort of competition in the film industry that leads to commercial imperatives which tend to dominate. Where do you place yourself ideologically? You have been a supporter of economic reforms. It seems sort of a mishmash in a sense that while the logic of economic reforms, of liberalization, of competition is seen to lead to economic growth, but there are these spin-offs too, which are quite unacceptable for civil society.
Yes, that is a dilemma. For instance, I can tell you, and at times this debate, as I told you, goes a little astray. Shekhar Kapoor told me that he was making an ad film on ice cream in Italy, and there was a particular scene of a knife with a child, and the requisite board said you cannot do it because it may provoke children to do violence. Therefore, governmental intervention, no, but a structure regulatory body having power to take a decision. For instance, we have the ASCI, Association of Advertising Agencies. We also talked to them. Now, one of their ex-secretary general wrote to me to complain that they never take a decision and the advertisement runs its course. Now, these are issues, and I would say that the government's role ought to be minimum in this. For instance, I am at the moment suffering a peculiar problem. We have got almost a pornographic channel coming. I will not like to take the name. I am getting complaints, ban it. At times it comes, at times it vanishes. I have asked my officers to look into it, because I am not in the business of banning any channel. It goes against my temperament. But if things are overdone, at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the night, something pornographic is shown in your bedroom, then one has to take a view. So these are issues which leads you to a dilemma. But I'm sure once our civil society grows, we shall find an answer, with the government playing the role of a facilitator.
What is the distinction perhaps between, say, government and the party? It seems in many ways that the party and let's say the parivar is perceived as being a lot less tolerant perhaps than the government is.
I would say that this is a public perception. Let me tell you, I am an RSS Swayamsevak, but on many issues we have talked about them, and they have said, no, you are right. On the contrary, their views has been more than enough. Yes, there are people who take a rigid position, but when you explain to them, they also understand. Coupled with that, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, they have laid down the rules of the game very clear for us, and their guidance is of great help to us. Therefore, that is not a problem at all.
But to what extent do you think that the agendas of the party and of the tradition that you come from are diluted by the sort of the political alliances, the political compulsions of governance that you've had to work under? And to make the question sort of perhaps more comfortable, to what degree has that applied to your own ministry, to your own work?
You see, one learns many things by experience. Many people in the Parivar had views about reforms. When we came to power, when we understood the wider canvas, then we saw that these decisions are to be taken. And the most important is, if India is to grow, India has to reform itself. We retained our position as far as our position on the WTO obligations is concerned. We fought our battle well in Cancun, you can see that, articulating the concerns of developing countries, which we shall always do. But these changes have come about. Those are welcome signs. And people in the country, with 5 years of our government, are understanding and appreciating the benefits of reforms.
So India is shining.
Surely, why not? It is.
You know, there has been a comment from the election commissioner urging restraint on India shining. Without posing the criticism which is in the public domain, what is the justification? What is the value of your money and my money as taxpayers being spent, not just before an election, but at any time, hundreds of crores on promoting the notion of the fact that India is shining? I mean, either we experience it or we don't.
Now it has come, it is 50 crores. First and foremost, this is the age of information. This is the age of communication. Why should not the government communicate its own developmental strategy? A, to get investment. And it is not a governmental achievement, it is India's achievement. India is changing. There was a debate about 8.1% growth. Even the Indian Statistical Institute said, yes, that growth is indeed possible.
But doesn't it inherently imply that, look, it is the government that has enabled this to happen?
No, surely. Now let me put it a different way. Is there a space in newspapers for governmental achievement to be printed? There is always a constraint. Private bodies, private companies can blow up their trumpet with 10-page ad. But the government, yes, Rajiv, I would have really appreciated if the factual basis of that campaign would have been questioned. That this claim is wrong, that claim is wrong. That has not been done. Secondly, as for the CNC's observations are concerned, certainly it is entitled to our respect. But that also poses the fundamental question. And that is, when should it stop? The day the model code of conduct comes, it will have to stop. But should it stop 2 months before, 5 months before, 6 months before? No decision to be taken in the last year of elections? These are issues to be debated in consultation with all the political parties. And once a consensus is reached, then it's fine.
You know, you've described yourself as being, a loyal member of the party, of the Prime Minister's government, and that you would do whatever his wishes were after the elections. 10 years from now, where do you see yourself? Where would you like to see yourself? Independent of who the Prime Minister is or whether you're in government or not, what is your aspiration?
You are asking me to predict about my own future. Huh?
Not predict. We all have dreams about ourselves. Do you have a dream about yourself?
Rajiv, it is difficult for me. Yes, I feel very passionately about India. India must become a big player in the world, economically, politically, and also culturally. And this ray of hope I see among the young people of the country today. India's population is substantially young today.
But don't you fear that it could be big and bad?
No, I'm an optimist. And if Indian young people have done us an IT revolution, one proud of that. The pharmaceutical revolution, other things, manufacturing hub changing. So I'm quite sure the great entrepreneurial ability of India and the Indian youth is going to shine in the world. And if you ask me 10 years hence, I would like to see myself smiling at the side steps somewhere near when India is shining world. India is shining in the world.
I think I see a future finance minister here. Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad.
Thank you.